Hello, Internet friends. Today is Saturday, November 29th, and this is the Saturday after Thanksgiving in 2025. I wanted to come on today and tell you about a concert that I went to a couple weeks ago. On Friday, November 14th, I went to the Florida Theater and saw Carl Palmer, who was the drummer for Emerson, Lake and Palmer in the 1970s and before that and beyond that. He is the last surviving member of that band. I know he has been touring for a while, reviving some of their music and presenting it with video presentations of his former bandmates. And I believe he used to call it ELP Legacy, but this one was called An Evening with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. He plays the drums himself. He has the video of his former bandmates, and he has two new band members with him. And the music is all woven together in an interesting way that was kind of fun and kind of surprising. I had heard about the tour before, and I was never really interested in going because I thought it would just be nostalgia and the video thing sounded kind of strange. But one day, a couple months ago, there was a one-day sale on tickets for this at half price, and just on the spur of the moment, I bought a ticket, so that's how I ended up going. I want to start by telling you about my history with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They were a very important band to me as a teenager, my number one favorite band, and they had a big influence on me and my taste in music as I grew up, and even today I can trace some of that back to them. But I discovered them probably 1973 or 1974, and they were not a new band at that time. They had been around a while, but I was young and I hadn't heard about them yet. And this was about the time that my parents started letting me stay up late on Friday nights and watching the late night rock concert shows like Don Kirshner's rock concert, and there were a couple of others too. And I don't know which one this was on, but one night Emerson, Lake and Palmer came on. I was just sitting there by myself, and they made a huge impression on me. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was a awkward teenager for sure. I was learning organ and playing in churches, and that's not a great way to impress your friends when you're a teenager, but it was fun for me. And I was doing my math homework on Friday nights and just being my usual follow the rules, get the straight A's kind of self. When they came out and were performing their music, by the end of the set, I was kneeling in front of the television because I was so impressed and overwhelmed by it all. And what I was struck by was they were using classical technique and classical music even, and they were just taking it up and over the top and over the edge to make it exciting to a teenager like me. The big moment for me, I think, was when Keith Emerson's piano rose up into the air and started spinning. So he was going head over heels playing the piano, and I was just amazed at that. And then he was strumming inside the piano on the strings, and he was stabbing swords into his Hammond organ and pulling the organ over on top of himself, lying on the ground, playing it upside down. Just all these wild things, and that really impressed a teenager like me. Also, Jimi Hendrix setting his guitar on fire was exciting, and just anything else that was big and over the top back then. It felt like just what I needed in my life, just what I needed that I could identify with, that would make life more exciting and give me something to be excited about and aim for. Keith Emerson, the keyboardist, he really was a genius, I think. There's never been anybody like him, and I don't see anybody who would ever try to take up his mantle and carry on with that style of music. I remember in college, one of my composition teachers had us all by Scheherazade, the written score by Rimsky-Korsakov, because he was talking about the colors and the orchestration, and what a genius Rimsky-Korsakov was in that. And Keith Emerson was my Rimsky-Korsakov. The colors that he would get from his synthesizers which were a new instrument to me for sure, and still new at that time and how they could be used. They were just so bold and colorful and exciting and evocative. And then the techniques he did with them. He used a lot of portamento, which was sliding from one note to another, and made that very expressive. He had a strong sense of melody, which I think was set him above everybody else. I loved Rick Wakeman of Yes too, and Rick Wakeman was my first rock concert that I ever went to when I was 15. Rick Wakeman, he did a lot of flowery arpeggios and scales and things like that. Keith Emerson was such a strong melodicist that it felt like an adventure every time he was playing. So notes would rise and fall and change color and swoop from one to the next. And it was very visually evocative and would grab you and carry you along on the adventure, like a bird flying through the air or something. It's hard to explain, but I hope you get the excitement that it brought to me at that time in my life. Greg Lake, who played bass and guitar and sang, what I liked about him is that he had a way of doing lyrics that was much more exciting than my life was. Like, I might say, hey, let's grab a rock and throw it in the ocean, but his lyrics were just take a pebble and cast it to the sea. And when you're an awkward little 13-year-old, somebody talking like that, and you just know they're smarter than you and they experience life more fully than you. So it made me want to take a pebble and cast it to the sea. Then Carl Palmer on the drums was just amazing musically. He had all his rudiments down as a technician, but then he brought so much excitement to it too. And what impressed me again was the over-the-top nature of it. He had timpani, and he had gongs, he had the full drum set with lots of toms and all that. And so he'd get it all going. He'd have doing the bass drums with his feet, and then he'd get the mallets, do the timpani, do the foot pedal on the timpani so it would change pitch, then be banging the two gongs that were above his head, kind of backhanding them. And then the thing that really grabbed me was he had a string above that he grabbed with his teeth that rang a bell with it like that. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It's hard to put into words, but I was overwhelmed and carried away, and I felt like I was exploring a new planet, and I was ready for whatever adventure that brought me. So after that introduction on television, I bought their first album, which had Take a Pebble on it, and their one hit Lucky Man, which I had heard on the radio before. And Lucky Man, it's such a good example of what I'm talking about. Like the song itself by Greg Lake, it could have been sung by Donovan as a nice little ballad. It could have been sung by Peter, Paul, and Mary even. But what lifts it up was that then the keyboards come in toward the end, the synthesizer, the drums are there, and both of them are over the top. They took this nice little ballad and they're just kind of stomping all over it, and the keyboard solo is soaring up and falling down, and you hear the sounds of battle and bullets flying and bombs falling and all that. But there's also a freedom to it. There's also a sense of humor to it, and it's great. I'm not going to try to play any of the recordings here because I don't even know how the copyrights work, but you can pause this and go listen to Lucky Man on Spotify or something and see what I'm talking about. The drums too, you could keep a nice little 3/4 kind of beat with that song, but he's doing a march and he's doing big fills all through the song, kind of like Keith Moon would do with The Who, just like I say, kind of stomping all over it, but it doesn't hurt the song. It lifts it up and takes it to a new place. So you hear the nice little story. It's a sad story about the man dying, and the ballad comes to an end. But then the drums are still marching, and the keyboard, the synthesizer is swooping up and falling down, and the trumpet call is sounding, and it's just really something. It's like I say, nobody else has ever done music the way they did it, and it spoke to me, and it was something that really affected me and made me excited. My next major thing, I just wanted their live album so much. It was a 3 record set, which also is over the top. Everything they did was over the top. And you open it up and you have the letters E, L, P on the 3 sections. And one day, there are two older friends in high school that I accompanied at the high school solo contests. Uh, Russ Phillis was a cellist and Phil Blanton was a French horn player, and I accompanied them when they did their solos at the contests. They pooled their money and they bought me that album. It was one of the greatest gifts I ever got. And Russ brought it to my house one time and he said, "This is what you wanted, right?" And I was speechless. I'm even getting choked up now talking about it. Sorry about that. But I held it in my hands and it was like a beam of sunlight fell on it. And then I tore off the shrink wrap and you could hear the sound of angels singing as I did. I was that excited about it. And those of you who are younger wouldn't know this, but they used to arrange the sides of the different albums so that on a double album you'd have sides 1 and 4 on one platter and then 2 and 3 on the other, so you could put 1 on the stacking arm and then 2 on top of that, and they'd fall down, play in order, then pick up the stack and turn it over. So this was that same way. It was 3 LPs. So one was sides 1 and 6, another was sides 2 and 5, and then one was sides 3 and 4. So you could stack them up just right. They would fall down one by one and play in sequence, and then just pick up the whole stack, turn them over, put them back down, and have the other 3 sides play. And it was a whole complete concert. It was just amazing. And it's one of those albums, if you know when you get one that you listen to so many times, you memorized every detail. That's definitely how this one was for me. Everybody else was doing air guitar in those days. I was doing air keyboards, and I would put that on, go through all 6 sides and do my air keyboards while I was playing along with Keith Emerson. So it was really exciting. It was quite a thing for me. And yeah, it just changed the way I looked at pop music, changed the way I looked at classical music even, and the way I looked at performing and presenting music. It wasn't who I was, but it was kind of who I wished I was, like a alter ego. Then I got older, had a driver's license, and they came to Portland in 1977. So I went to their concert at the Portland Memorial Coliseum. I think it was August of 1977, and got to see them live. And I have a lot of memories from that night. The sound was really echoey and stuff, and I wasn't smart enough to wear earplugs, so I came out of it feeling like I had cotton in my ears by the end. But I can remember the smell of marijuana, which was pretty exciting. And kudos to my parents for trusting me on all these concerts when I was a teenager, because they had no reference for what rock concerts were like, but they trusted me. And so, but I had my driver's license here, so I was able to drive myself. And this was back when being on the floor was the cheap seats. So now I think it's more like the in-demand seats are on the floor, but there were no chairs there. It was just standing room back before there was such thing as a mosh pit. So we were all standing around. And I remember somebody having a physical altercation with a security guard, and the bad guy was a lot bigger than the security guard was, so he had him down on the floor and he held him there a while and then ran away. And that felt like a lot of anarchy for me in my calm life. And then I heard a woman talking about Rick Wakeman and how wonderful he was, and how she thought he was better than Keith Emerson. And I had to argue with her, even though I loved Rick Wakeman. I said, Keith Emerson is just so much better. He just has the technique and all that. And so we had a friendly little argument about it. But it was quite a night. And I also, I won't shout out by name, but I actually asked a girl, which was a big deal for me at that time in my life, to go with me. And she said yes. It was amazing. And I thank her for putting up with my social awkwardness at that time and helping to make that night special. But the like I say, the concert was so echoey and loud, and it was fun to see them. But all my great memories of them are video or on LP and listening to them over and over and over throughout my life. Later on, like after I went to college, I did not follow all their future music. And they had one album that was called Love Beach. Everybody makes fun of the cover, and I did too. It was a bad cover. You can look it up. I think it hurt their career, there just wasn't any music after that that really grabbed me the way the earlier ones did, and up till that live album. I felt like they had achieved such a perfection and such an amazing level that how could they ever follow that up? And so I forgave them. I didn't think anything bad about them. And then both Emerson and Lake, they had somewhat tragic ends. And they had performances that weren't up to par and things like that. And then Keith Emerson took his own life over some of that, which is a very sad thing. And I think Greg Lake had some serious health problems, and finally we lost him too. I didn't look up what years those were, but that time was definitely over, so I thought that was the last we'd see of that. So when Carl Palmer started touring with the new music, I expected it to be nostalgia, and I'm not a huge fan of buying a concert ticket for nostalgia. I'm nostalgic about a lot of music, and I'll listen to it and play it for myself and enjoy it that way, but I'm not a huge fan of going to nostalgia-oriented concerts. I was thinking about one recently, which was from the 90s, when I saw them anyway, 80s and 90s, Soul Asylum. And I went to see them last year, I think, in Ocala, Florida. And still so good, and the songs are so good, but it's just such a different energy. And my impression was a bunch of grandpas holding up their phone like this and singing along with, "Got a ticket for a runaway train." And I remember in the 90s, Soul Asylum, it was all, I want somebody to shove, there'd be a mosh pit, you'd be bouncing around in that, and then you could practically feel the sweat from the stage dripping off on you. And I really miss that energy. And their concert I'm glad I went to their concert because I enjoyed the music, and Dave Pirner is a great songwriter, and it was fun to see him in this new decade of his life. But it didn't have that same energy, so I left feeling a little empty. I enjoyed hearing the songs, I enjoyed seeing the main band member, but it made me long for the old days. So that's what I expected. So that's why I wasn't excited about seeing Carl Palmer all by himself with video screens and things like that. But for the half price sale, I thought, why not? Let's give it a try. I'm not doing anything else that night. And also I recognized that it was just a way to honor Carl, and he and his band had been important in my life, and this was my way to say thank you, just to show up and relive the old times. But I will say that when I entered the hall and I saw the drums set up there and the video screens and some other microphones and things, I felt an excitement. I felt the excitement. It was having to do with the crowd. I was right there in that age group. I was probably on the young edge of the crowd. In fact, I don't think I saw anybody in their 40s even. I think everybody would have been 50s, 60s, 70s, or even above. But there was excitement in the air, so it made me excited for the concert. The concert started with a video collection of popular culture references to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and it was really funny. There was one Cheers episode where they mentioned that, I won't explain each setting, but there's one Cheers episode. There was a Jeopardy episode which was hilarious. I guess the category was something about famous trios, and they used, I didn't see it exactly, but like maybe they would have used Arnold Palmer, the golfer, for Carl Palmer. So they gave the name of Arnold the golfer and then two other people that had Emerson and Lake as their last names, and they waited for an answer, and the question is whatever the answer is, and then you're supposed to give the question, and none of the contestants could do it, And then Alex Trebek says, Emerson, Lake, and Palmer. And he said, sounded so disappointed, and it was hilarious anyway. And then there were some 2 or 3 Simpsons references to Emerson, Lake, and Palmer that I had never seen before. And I know there's lots of Simpsons episodes, so that's not too surprising, but I would have thought I'd seen it by now. But they were hilarious. And one was Homer singing along with Lucky Man, and then he started using the steer wheel of his car like the pitch bend wheel of the synthesizer or something. So at the end he's going ooh-wee, 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 and driving all over the road. It was just hilarious. So that got us in a good mood. And then you know what the opening song is going to be when it's Emerson, Lake and Palmer. There are many great opening songs in concerts. And just before I did this, I watched a video by Michael Palmisano. I enjoy his commentary on music. And he had a video about the 5 greatest opening songs for live concerts. Or maybe not the greatest, but 5 great opening songs for live concerts. And he had Thunderstruck, Born in the USA, Enter Sandman, War Pigs, and In the Flesh by Pink Floyd. And I say the band there. The other bands you should know, or you have to go do your homework. And to that list I would add Where the Streets Have No Name by U2, and Hello There by Cheap Trick. So a lot of great opening songs. But for me, in my life, there's nothing like Welcome Back My Friends to the Show That Never Ends. And that's what we heard at the start of this, along with the Aaron Copland Hoedown, and just a lot of that kind of exciting opening music that was on the live album too. And so that really got me in the mood. That was awesome. And then he comes out, I mean, he's there playing drums, and the videos are going of his old bandmates, and the 2 new musicians are there, and it just takes a while to soak it all in. It was really something. There was recorded things going on, there were live things going on, and there were things I could see that were going on and things that I couldn't see that were going on. And it was so hard to tell what's live, what's not live, what's recorded, what's not recorded. And it didn't matter. And before that concert, I would have not thought that would not matter to me, but it didn't matter at all. It was woven together so well. The 2 musicians, I'm going to try to say their names. I have them written down here. The one name is the only one I have trouble with. That's Paul Bielatovitz or something like that. He played guitar and he sang, and when he sang, he sounded enough like Greg Lake that you could usually tell it wasn't Greg Lake, but it sounded enough like him that it really did the music justice. And then the other one, Simon Fitzpatrick, he played bass, and he played the Chapman stick at different times. And the Chapman stick, I can't explain it all to you, but it's got a bunch of strings, it's got one long neck, and you're tapping with both hands on the frets and making the music that way. And one hand is kind of doing bass lines sometimes, and the other's doing the higher notes. But I don't know how it's tuned. I don't even know how many strings it has, and so I can't tell you much about it. I believe he was playing a 6-string bass too, but anyway, he knew what he was doing. He was a real technician. The guitar guy, Paul, he was amazing in what he could do. And what was even more amazing is that he was, through some MIDI or something, he was getting the keyboard sounds on his guitar. So that's what I mean. There were things that were recorded that I couldn't tell if they were recorded, things that were live, I couldn't tell if they were live, because sometimes his guitar sounded like a Hammond organ, and it wasn't a letdown. It didn't feel artificial. It felt like really good. It had the integrity to it. It was really good. And he would also get synthesizer lines on his guitar. And there was one song, I should have looked this up and written down which one it is, but it's where there's a couple organ chords and then a couple synthesizer notes, a couple organ chords, a couple synthesizer notes. And he was alternating between the two with a foot pedal. So he'd get the chords down here, hit the foot pedal, and go up here, get the synthesizer sound, go back down. And it was really amazing. My one criticism of him is that he was so good that it looked so easy that we almost didn't appreciate it, I think. He needed to grit his teeth or something, make it look hard, even if he was just pretending, because it was amazing what he could do and just the technical ability that he had. I can't imagine what his education was. He must have gone to like Berkeley or something like that and really dug in and learned the whole neck and learned all the scales and all the modes and all the triads and all that kind of stuff, because it flowed out of him. It was amazing. And he would do it so relaxed, just looking around and smiling. And when it was time to sing, he'd put some soul into that. And like I say, it sounded like Greg Lake, but it had a little edge that was a little different than Greg Lake. And it was just really good, really good, really good representation of the music that we loved. Chapman Stick, played by Simon, got a solo at one point, extended solo on Pictures at an Exhibition. And that was one of my favorite albums by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And the music was by Mussorgsky, who wrote Pictures at an Exhibition. And I hope I'm getting this right. I think it was written for solo piano, but then it was also famously orchestrated and is often performed by orchestras, but has a lot of very colorful character-based kind of movements to it. And that's one whole album that Emerson, Lake and Palmer did. And I listened to that over and over, so I had that memorized too. And he played these on the Chapman Stick, getting the bass lines, the melodies, the chords, all that, all tapping them out. And it was good. It was a really good display of the mastery of that instrument. It let me down a little bit in that it was a little clunky for how we were used to hearing the Pictures at an Exhibition, and not as much tonal variety as what Keith Emerson used. But as a guy learning how to do that music on that instrument, he did a masterful job of that. So I'm not going to complain about it. I'm just going to say it left me wanting a little bit more from that. Another song that stood out to me was From the Beginning. And I don't know why I never thought of this before, but it's obvious that on the recording that Carl Palmer is playing the bongos. And you're so used to seeing him behind this huge drum set with everything thrown in there that he really brings this song down to just the bongos. And he brought it out, had a pair of bongos between his legs, and he played it like that. And it was really something, because I think we think of those instruments as toys or something you use in the preschool for kids in the rhythm band or something. But it was just masterful, and it showed the technique that he has and the sensitivity that he has to the music and the imagination he has as well. Carl Palmer played an extended drum solo at one point, and you would have guessed that was coming since that's who was on the bill, but it was just wonderful. And he has all the technique and all the instruments, and he goes all around the drum set. That's fascinating. He did that for, I think the solo took like 20 minutes. Another friend said it was like 10 minutes, but it went on for a long time anyway. And this is for, gosh, how old is he? I meant to look that up. I think he's 74, maybe, something like that. He's got let me back up too. When he came out and started playing, it's something indescribable that I felt from his playing and from the music. And I can't think of the word to describe it. Like he had the total control of everything he was doing. There was a muscularity to it, is how I would describe it. There was a visceralness to it, like he really feels it from the inside. And then the technical perfection, that there's not a missed note or anything like that. He knows exactly what he's doing and how to do it. But it's not, sometimes when you think about technical perfection, you think of something that doesn't have the soul or doesn't have the emotion to it. And it had all that. It had all the soul, all the emotion. And plus, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they had that element of fun that I talked about before, and he's having fun doing this. And you see this nice, soft-spoken, grandfatherly guy up there doing it, and it's amazing. It's really amazing. So yes, this drum solo had all that. Of course, we were used to it by that point in the program. And then he took it to a place that reminded me of when I saw him, I think on video sometime, do a solo back in the 70s. But what he did this time is he got down to where he was just hitting his sticks together and hitting on different ends and doing rhythms and little rolls and things. And it sounds silly, but it was fascinating. All the things that he could do with just this. So what that does for me is he has this whole universe around him, all those drums, all those different instruments above him, behind him, in front of him, on all sides of him. And he's just doing this and making it just as powerful, just as exciting, and just as expressive as all the rest. So what I remembered from years ago, back in the 70s when I saw him on video, is he got down to just the hi-hat. And same thing, he had a whole universe around him, but he was focused on this one tiny part of the universe for a while. And he was playing on the top cymbal and the bottom cymbal and opening the cymbals, playing, closing, playing between the cymbals, playing on the stick of the rod that comes up above the cymbals. So much of this I can't put into words. It's frustrating, but it's when you take the whole universe and you bring it down to something simple. And then maybe the reverse of that is you take a simple concept and you spread that out to the whole universe. And he was doing that musically. There's a Garrison Keillor quote that I read once that I can't remember how it goes exactly, but it's on a theological level. He was saying, take a complex idea like God and bring it down to one little thing like love for a child, and then take something like love that you can feel and opening that up and seeing how it represents God, something like that. He said it much better. But anyway, that does something to me when those kind of things happen. It's very moving, and it helps you to see the big picture in a different way, and it helps you to see the micro picture in a different way. So anyway, I was quite moved by the solo. I videoed some, so let me play a little bit here. Okay, I don't usually try to do a lot of video in concerts, and because I want to live in the moment, I don't want to be looking at my phone screen and things like that. I want to see what's going on stage. But I wanted to share that because I wanted my drummer friends to see it, and at that point when I started videoing it, it had already been going on for a while, and I just thought, I want something to remember this by, so I don't know how long I let the video go, maybe 10 minutes or something, but I showed you a little bit of it there. Whatever I show you, it's like usual. It's like trying to photograph a sunset. You can't give the picture of the whole thing, so you just have to hear from me being overwhelmed what it means. Carl Palmer and friends, they went through all the songs you would expect to hear from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And there were some times where it was just video. We got a solo from Keith Emerson, just video, and then it morphed into something else and the live musicians were back. And Greg Lake, we saw him singing pretty much just video, like from the beginning with bongos and just pretty much the video, I think. But it didn't matter. Like I say, the video was there, live musicians were there, it just didn't matter. We were being presented with the creativity and the imagination, and that's what mattered. The encore they did was the Nutrocker, which is the March from the Nutcracker by Tchaikovsky. And everybody thinks this is an Emerson, Lake and Palmer original arrangement, but they were covering, I had to look this up, it was from 1961, a group called B. Bumble and the Stingers. And they took that March from the Nutcracker and turned it into a boogie kind of beat and played it. And then Emerson, Lake and Palmer played it and they rocked it up even more. And that was on the album, the Pictures at an Exhibition, and it was the encore on there. And so it was the perfect encore for this. It was just so much fun. So I, I've got nothing negative to say about the concert at all. They really put work into this, and they respected us as an audience and gave us something that was really worth seeing. I'm going to do one little critique of my fellow generation and audience members as we all age here. My half price seat was clear over on the left side of the auditorium, or theater, I should say, I guess. About 20 minutes or 30 minutes into the concert, there's a steady stream of grandpas standing up and shuffling back to use the restroom. I know we've all got enlarged prostates or whatever, but all I would say to the audience is wait between songs. When there was an aisle right by me and they'd walk by and maybe something interesting would happen on stage, so they'd turn around and stand their while and block my view. And we just got to think of each other and all that. There was an intermission, and at intermission I moved to the next section over, which had some empty seats there, so I didn't have the aisle there with people walking by. But I know I get bothered easily by things, but come on, grandpas, just wait till between songs to go pee and you'll be okay. So that's all I'll say about that. After the concert, Paul, the guitarist, came out and sat on the edge of the stage just right away. Just like we clapped and the lights came up, audience started filing out. He walked right out, sat there on the edge of the stage. And so I went down there. In my imagination, Carl Palmer was going to come out and shake my hand and thank me for being there when I was 17 years old at his concert and things like that. But that didn't happen. But it was fascinating to see this guy. And some people, I don't know if he knew them personally, but he was so friendly anyway. And they knew his career and knew him enough to ask a lot of questions about it. I guess he has his own project that he works on and his own albums out. And he was talking about going to do some of that after this concert. This was the last concert for a while for them, but I think the tour does continue on in 2026. So maybe they just wanted to be home for the holidays. But it was fascinating to hear him talk, and he's just a nice guy. And I would have loved to talk one-on-one, but I didn't want to force my way in there. I did ask him one time what year was he born, because I was thinking he was like in his 30s or even late 20s or something, but he's said 1978, which is the year I graduated from high school. And that was the year after I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer live, or Carl Palmer last time I saw him live. So I wanted to point out, I saw him in 1977, I saw him in 2025. That's 48 years. 48 years between times I went to his concert. So just an aside to all you young people out there, go to the concerts whenever they come, whenever you can afford it. Go to a concert. That's what makes life good. That's what makes memories happen, things like that. So I can't think of any concert I've ever regretted going to, even the ones that didn't really move me that much. I'm always glad I went to a concert. So 48 years later, here we were, and this guy was born that next year after I saw them. And so he's already a mature, very accomplished musician. And he just had a warmth about him too, that I hope he does well and goes far, and he deserves to for the person he is and the musician he is. So finally, I would have to ask myself from before I bought my ticket, was this concert worth going to? And the answer is yes, it definitely was. I'm so glad I went. Was it nostalgia? Yes, it was nostalgia, but it was, I'm going to read because I took a minute to write this down. It was artfully executed, lovingly presented, performed with both virtuosity and warmth, nostalgia. So it was very much worth my time, and if they come again, I would probably go see them again. Not next year or something, but 3 or 4 years down the road, if he's still out there doing it in his 80s. Sure, I'd go see him. It was fascinating. The combination of the video, the live musicians, and then the one guy who tied them both together, it gave it a timeless quality. That was really amazing. And the music is just incredible. For those of us who grew up in the 70s, we didn't know what we were going through, because there's like Rush was going into the 80s and making good fresh music, and they were the progressive band maybe that time. Members of Yes are out there doing things, and they're still amazing musicians and all that. But 1970s, so many things were going on, and it's when you look back, it's amazing. The different styles that emerged, and even disco, throw disco in there. I remember when disco came in like 1976, 1977, and I thought it ruined everything, but it was just one more amazing style that was going on during that time. And so much of what we do now is kind of rehashing punk, disco, progressive, heavy metal, arena rock. It's some mixture of those elements. All those elements were in their pure form back then, and it's amazing. So yeah, thank you to Carl Palmer for tying that all together for us. I wanted to point out that it passed the t-shirt test too. If you know me, you know I don't spend $40 on a t-shirt lightly. If I bought the shirt, that means that I had a great time, and it means I want memories of that great time. And so I bought that. As a disclaimer, I talked about the 1970s there. That's really who this performance is aimed at. If you don't know the history of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you didn't grow up with the music, and you would still be impressed by the musicianship, no doubt. But this isn't really for you without knowing some of that history. So, like, if my sons were free, I wouldn't take my sons to it, for instance, unless one of them suddenly got an interest in that band and was listening to the music, something like that. That's not to put down the music at all. It's just the nostalgia element is strong, and that's because it's for those of us who grew up with the music and had it be part of the soundtrack of our lives. That's all. This was an emotional talk for me. I don't know if you'll hear on the video, my voice was cracking several times there, but that's what music does to you. And so in closing, I just encourage everybody, go see live music, because that's where it's at. That's where things happen. That's where your memories are made. That's what defines your life. And one song can bring back all the smells, taste, touch, sights of that time in your life. So go see concerts and be nice to each other. Everybody out there, look out for each other. This is a hard time we're going through in America, and there's hard things in the news every day. And I don't care what your beliefs are or what you think about politicians or religions or different sets of people, different nationalities. I don't care. You got to look out for each other. We got to take care of each other. We got to see ourselves in each other. Stop looking for an enemy and start looking for yourself when you meet somebody else. What is in them that speaks to what is in you. And that's all. Have a happy Thanksgiving. If you're seeing this sometime in the future, have a happy future. Goodbye.